welcome to Leaders of Tomorrow, 18 hours daily initiative that celebrates the undying entrepreneurial spirit of micro, small and medium enterprises. We're talking all things retail as we count down to the year end as well as to the festive season. And today I'm talking all things electronics retail. We're in conversation with Avijit Mitra. He's the CEO of Infinity Retail. Thank you very much for speaking with us here on the Leaders of Tomorrow on 18 hours. Such a pleasure to have you with us, sir. Let me maybe start this conversation by asking you to talk to our viewers about how the landscape has changed as far as retail MSMEs are concerned and how the retail landscape itself has changed.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on this show. I think the landscape has changed tremendously in the last 5 years. With the online, the digital space exploding in India, there's a lot of, in fact, we are about 10 years old, and 10 years back was the first lot of change which happened, which is essentially the bigger players coming into organized retail. And thereafter, again, 5 years back, there was this entire digital revolution. And therefore, I mean, it's affecting every retailer, whether it's large or small or medium. So to that extent, there's a massive change. One of the aspects that I would like to mention over here is the consumer himself has changed, because he is no longer a person who's just walking in for a commodity that he's not aware of. He's actually studied, he's researched, and then he's walking in. So there's a huge change in the consumer as well.
Speaking of that, would it be possible for you to do a little bit of, say, crystal ball gazing and tell us what, in your opinion, do you think is going to be that one big thing that really disrupts the market, maybe in a 5-year time frame or a 10-year time frame, or if you think that's too long, in a shorter time period?
Look, I think the digital influence is the big one. It's already happening. It's it's not about the future so much, but it's already happening. And technology itself will enable a whole new kind of discovery that a customer. I think the enduring passion for shopping will remain. Human beings love to shop, but the way they shop and the way they do, particularly window shopping, will change quite a bit. Earlier they would go to a certain place and then start from there. Here, right from home, from the comfort of your bed, you're going to start, and you have already started. But over a period of time, I think there'll be a whole bunch of other technology which will come in, which will enable actual transactions as well, not just purchasing, but also services and so on. So there'll be a much more holistic exposure that the customer will get to the retailer from his from his home as well as when he's out there in the market.
For the sake of our viewers, could you possibly list the top 3 or the top 4 strengths that you think a small retailer has versus a larger peer?
Firstly, I think the small retailer is dealing with a smaller set of customer base, and therefore has this direct recognition. I mean, I know that when I go into my local grocer, the guy knows me. He might not know my name, but he knows me. He knows, I mean, I can sense from the purchase that I'm making, and if I'm missing something, he in fact says that, what about this? So he knows that there's a loyalty program actually happening in his mind. So that's a huge benefit. I mean, finally we all like to be recognized. So that's the first big one. The second is, by and large, because they pack the stores with a lot of range and inventory, they are able to get much more out of the floor space than perhaps the large retailer. And the third is, I think a large retailer, very large retailers particularly, are good at selling commodities, but a small retailer is good at selling solutions. So finally, I know that my grocer, if he doesn't have a stock, he will run and get from the neighboring grocer, but he will not let me go to the other one. So that kind of service, that kind of solution, that I know I'll get my stuff which I want, is something which large retailers struggle. They have their inventory management and so on, and therefore they find it difficult to match that personal touch that is there. So overall, it's one word, which is the personal touch, but if you bracket it, then it's basically, one is recognition, second is the kind of depth of range that he has in that small space, and thirdly, of course, making sure that he doesn't let the customer go anywhere. So he gives him a solution.
Maybe I can flip the question around a little bit and ask you to talk to us then about what you think are some of the biggest challenges small retailers face and what your advice would be in terms of how to deal with those challenges.
I think the key challenge that I see is the digital influence that the customer is going through. And when we, for example, when we talk about depth of range, you will find that online that the range is even bigger. And if the online players are able to crack the delivery at a convenient time and speed, then that becomes a real threat. Similarly, I think the entire the digital influence at the time of a research, and now I am talking about products which are slightly more expensive and higher tickets. So if you see in those kind of products, the customer is researching before they come. In our case, for example, 85% customers research before they come to the store. So he is no longer walking in thinking of a TV, he is thinking of Sony so and so model or 2-3 models, he's got a short list. Now if you are not able to play in that space, then it's a problem going forward, because then your mind share, you are losing your mind share over a period of time for certain categories. I wouldn't say that local grocery is that affected, but there are others who will get really affected by that. And there, unless you are able to sort of come on board in terms of that digital journey, then you will find a problem. And in that, it's a little expensive to go with your own solution. It's not a little expensive, it's very expensive to go with your own solution. But I am sure there will be other solutions which are there in the market. Maybe some are SaaS solutions, or some may be riding on somebody else who's got a solution which you pay as you go. And I think that might be one way to do it. I think the second one is that over a period of time, price cannot be the only game that you are playing. In any retail, particularly if you price is a hygiene, but at the same time if your only differentiation remains in price, then I think you will struggle, because the margins are anyway small in retail, and therefore if you get squeezed out in price, then you will find it very tough. So I would say that we've got to find what is the key reason that a customer should come to me, and stand by that in such a manner that the customer doesn't mind that little premium that just about gives us enough for a good profitable model.
I will come to pricing and the discounting strategy in just a bit, but I want to continue delving into what you think small retailers should do when it comes to the present environment. What advice would you have for a small retailer who's possibly looking at expanding, wants to become a slightly bigger retailer or retail chain? What is it going to take to go to that next level? Is it necessarily capital intensive? Is it perhaps technology? And therefore, what advice would you have in terms of what it's going to take to go to the next level?
So my advice in this would be that retail is a game of store by store. So every store, we believe very strongly that every store must stand on its own in terms of profitability, cash flows and so on. And it's only once you can fund the expansion out of that, should you think of going ahead with the expansion. You might go with more rapid expansion once you find 1 or 2 stores are getting funded out of this. But the initial stages, if you start borrowing, and a lot of retailers I've seen who have done or sort of got over leveraged and then gone ahead and expanded, and then the model is not sustained. So it's extremely important to make sure that each store stands on its own and funds the next one, and then maybe you leverage from there on. So you've got to be very careful about your leverage. The second is, I think finally retail is a catchment business. So how far do you expand? Okay, there are people who might say go all over India, but I think retail is a business which runs well if you pack into a cluster, and if you do that, then you get advertising benefits, you get logistics benefits and so on. So when you are expanding, you've got to it can be fashionable to go become pan India, but it's far better probably to cluster in a tight area, make sure your penetration is good there and you have adequate market coverage before you move on to the next cluster and the next cluster. It's a little slow, but I think it's much more profitable and much more sustainable in expansion. we've tried to follow that, and if you see, we are not even there in Kolkata, and that's the clustering approach. So I would say that we should also, and we were also small initially, and then we have become slightly bigger. So I would say that any new retailer should, or a small retailer should make sure that the cash flow is very certain before he expands.
I want to talk about the specific vertical of the market that you're in, which is electronics retail. Is that different from other forms of retail? What are some of the opportunities? What are some of the challenges? And what advice would you have for our viewers?
See, electronics is a very tricky business. I think it's quite different from some of the other retail verticals. The top three things which are really different are, number one is you're dealing with perishable products. So you got to understand that you're not dealing with a product which has long shelf life, particularly if you are going for the digital products like mobiles and so on. So the technology keeps changing, obsolescence is very high. So you've got to be very conscious of how much to buy and what to buy. So and unlike vegetables where you can book your loss and move on because it's a small thing, this is worse than vegetables because it looks good, but the price is high, and therefore every time you have a unsold stock, it can be a big hit to your bottom line. So all the margins can disappear. The second thing is the kind of staff that you require is quite different from normal retail. So you need staff who can be trained to a certain level of product knowledge. So which is slightly different, and therefore you have to invest in training, you have to invest in sometimes a little bit of technology for training and so on. And the third is the entire after sales moral obligation that one has. You can obviously say that this is a brand product and please move on there, but if you want to build the brand, then you have to stand up and say, we internally our motto is main hu na. So we need to be there and say that, okay, in case a customer comes back, it's my moral obligation to at least make sure that I give him a solution if there's a repair required or a damaged product or whatever. So that's another one. After sales also you have to stand by the customer. So these three things are real challenges in electronics. In electronics you have to be extremely extremely good at inventory management, and if you're not, you might make profit, but you actually are you could be sitting on a time bomb in the balance sheet. So you've got to make sure that your provisioning is very aggressive, your entire replenishment model is based on sell out and not sell in. There's a temptation to buy products in bulk and then get stuck. You can buy a product, a television for the cheapest price, but it becomes the most expensive buy if it doesn't sell. So you've got to be very careful about that in electronics. It's a and also because it's a small margin, it's a high ticket game, but it's a small margin. So which means that you have very small margin of error. It's like a tricky cricket pitch. So the margin of error is very small.
I want to talk about the role of government in the retail industry. Take a macro view, if possible, of the entire retail industry. At a time when the government is encouraging Make in India, how does the retail industry participate in it, if at all?
I'm not so sure about Make in India, but I think the government has a huge role to play. I think retail is one sector where the government can really enjoy the benefits of employment and so on. And it's an area which is very natural to Indians. So if they support, I think it's a great thing that can happen. I think one doesn't need subsidies or anything in this area. Basically, one really needs simplification, and this is something which the present government is very keen on doing, which is simplifying business. I think there are several areas that one can do. There are some steps which are happening. There are certain governments which have brought out a retail policy which are all in the right direction. I think those will, I think the government's attitude of saying less governance or less government and more governance is great. I think that's how we should expect them to do, and I think they're moving in the right direction in that sense.
Abhijit, do hold that thought. Let's take a very quick break on that note, but much more on the other side. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. You're with us here on Leaders of Tomorrow, and I'm in conversation with the CEO of Infinity Retail. One of the other big retail voices that we spoke to here on the show told us that this is an industry which is the most regulated in India. The plethora of regulations that exist are the highest, but at the same time it's the most confusing because there are at times overlapping regulation. Your view on that?
It is currently a lot of regulation that we have to abide by, and some of them have become probably redundant in the overall context of where India is today. They were framed much earlier with relevant reasons, but I think they have become less and less relevant, and I think the government is aware of that and they are working towards that, because otherwise these kind of retail policies would not have come out. And I think that directionally they are moving in the right direction. Perhaps the pace could be slightly better, but I think the movement is in the right direction.
Okay. Since we are also talking about Make in India, I want to talk about Skill India. You were talking, for example, about after-sales service and the role that it has for retailers in India. How relevant is Skill India as far as the retail industry is concerned?
So, I think it's a huge area where Skill India, that entire program can benefit, and if you look at it, the RAI is doing a lot of work on it. There is the RASI, the effort that we are doing. I am also part of that board, and there is tremendous work going on in that, training people on, for example, in our vertical, it's a very good training program that is getting designed, and after sales and so on. So, there is tremendous opportunity in retail playing a role in the Skill India program, and there are various organizations which are trying to work towards that, and we are trying to support. As retailers also we are supporting, as the association as well, RAI, we have a large program trying to really go aggressive on that area.
Since we're talking about Skill India, and I want to talk about manpower issues, and the reason I bring it up is that we get a lot of feedback from our viewers saying, how do we ensure that the employee we have hired just about 3 or 6 months ago doesn't leave? What, in your opinion, should be an effective hiring as well as a retaining strategy for MSME retailers?
I think one of the mistakes, and it's a personal opinion, but I think just as in consumers have changed, I think the employees have changed tremendously, and we are talking about the millennials and so on. They've changed tremendously. Their attitude has changed tremendously. So one of the things, for example, in Chroma, one of the things which we did was we said, let's change this business about working or paying for so many hours working. Okay, we know that in the morning there is not much work because this, the customer in traffic is very low, and in the evening it's much higher. Now 9 hours is the sort of statutory requirement, but we said why should we do that? Let's have a 5.5 day weekday. Because we are and not cut the salary or something, just only in Diwali they can come for the full period of the entire week, but the other weeks they can come 5.5 days, because the youngster wants to work and he is not bothered about rules and 9 hours and stuff like that. He wants to achieve. That's one change. Similarly, something as simple as clothes. I mean, we used to have uniform rules and so on. And I said, let's change that and say that, look, all of you are proud of what you are wearing, so wear what you want. And it's just energized the whole place after that. So there are small things which these guys are looking for. They're looking to achieve, and you've got to make the atmosphere conducive for them to achieve. And if you do that, I think the salary becomes a little less. They are willing to pay a premium or accept a premium for that, and one has to bear that in mind. I think if we just apply the like my age regulations about the way you conduct life, you'll find it very tough. Then they'll start comparing salaries and so on. But these are real achievers. They want to go out and do something and come out in the evening and say, today I did something, and that has really changed. And they're also looking at how to there's reverse mentoring, all sorts of things which are happening in today's world, because they, in certain areas, they're far ahead of an experienced person who's got 25-30 years of experience, particularly like, for example, digital space. So they understand those kind of things, and therefore you got to give that space to them to accept that. There are companies which will say, no, you can't go to the net because this is not the time for the net. You have to do work or something like that. But if you just open that out, you will find there is a tremendous acceptance of the entire atmosphere, and the retention will become better.
We are of course coming up on the year end, and it's also the festive season, which is the busiest period for the entire retail industry. You were talking earlier about pricing strategy. What advice do you have for our MSME retailers in terms of a pricing strategy? Most online players offer heavy discounts, but that is possibly not something which is the best strategy for a small retailer who may or may not be able to afford it. In such a scenario, what would your advice be?
Look, I think the festival season is a time of relative irrationality for the customer, because the customer is then passionate, he's thinking of doing something really fulfilling for the family. And I think more than pricing, what plays out well there in terms of how do I satisfy the customer's need. So what does the customer really need during this time? There's a busy period, there's a lot of crowd and so on. How do I make that easy? How do I make it easy? Through actually giving him the offer that he wants. Today the segmentation of customers is no longer at a very macro level. It has to be very, very deep segmentation. So you have to understand that X person wants during Diwali this item. And that is how even in Chroma we are actually asking the customer, what is your wish for this season? Give me the exact model that you want to buy, rather than just tell me I want to buy a TV, or not even telling me anything. That something I am going to buy. You tell me exactly the model you want, I'll give you an offer on that model. So how do I achieve that? I think as a small retailer you might be able to do that, because you know certain customers. So you start asking them, what are you planning? Let me start building a portfolio for you. And if you can do that, sharpen your offer, then you will not unnecessarily throw pricing. Pricing means it cuts across products, and therefore you are throwing a lot of discounts where the customer is not really interested. There are some guys you lose, but at the same time there are customers who want value, who want actually the product that they want the service around that.
Sure. One quick last word. If there was one piece of advice for our retail viewers, what it would be?
I would say that get your core proposition right. Why should a customer come to you? And that my advice would be, should not be price. So you have to find another reason for the customer to come. It might be closeness to his house, it might be home delivery, it might be the smile or whatever it is. But get a niche, a segment that you are very focused on, and say that for this segment I'll have this proposition. There will be other customers, but at least for this segment I'll have this proposition, and that I will make sure that that proposition is delivered 100% consistently.
Thank you very much for speaking with us here on the Leaders of Tomorrow. Do remember that if you have any feedback for us, or you want to get in touch with us with any queries you may have, you can write in to us at leadersoftomorrow@timesgroup.com. You can also reach us on social media using the hashtag LOT, or call us on that number you see on your screens. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.